Okay, welcome to another episode of United for a Healthy Stoughton. My name is Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator for the town of Stoughton, and I am excited to have with me today Dean Jenkins of Supply the Y. And Dean also happens to be a sergeant at the Stoughton Police Department, so welcome, Dean, to the show.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for thinking of me.
All right, so let's start out with who is Dean Jenkins? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
All right. Well, I am a Stoughtonian through and through. My family's been in Stoughton for about 44 years. We moved here literally a month after I was born. So my mother still lives in the house that I grew up in, and that's basically, I'm a class of 94 graduate, and I am also a coach of youth sports in town. My kids are involved in things around town. So if you live in Stoughton, you've probably seen me somewhere, and not just during my day job.
Great. So that is awesome. So I think, and a part of who you are also is you are a police officer, and that's a piece of your identity, and it's not your whole identity, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about what is Supply the Y. How did you come up with this? Tell us about your vision for this work that you've been embarking on.
Absolutely. So Supply the Y, the easiest way to understand it is it's basically my teaching, my problem solving, and my conversational style. And I utilize this style pretty much in all aspects of my life. And I try to find what it does is it gives me unique ways to convey ideas and thought processes and points of view that typically pertain to difficult or complex subject matter. So it's kind of a way for me to just explain things in a way that people can understand and to get people together on difficult conversations, difficult topics. Mm-hmm. So, a little bit more about it. I've basically been this has been my thought process since I was a teenager, and I didn't realize what it was. It's not something I consciously thought of, but I can pretty much tell you when it first really the light bulb went off in my head about this, and it was when I was a freshman in high school. I don't know if you went to Stoughton High School, but we had these things called.
I did not.
Okay, well, we had these things called commons, and anybody who's older out there will remember these. And basically, Stephanie, those were free periods in the cafeteria when you didn't have a class. So myself and one of my best friends, this kid named Eddie, we were yelling back and forth about some subject. I'm not sure what it was. And the teacher that was on duty in commons walked over to us very calmly, and he kind of asked us what we were doing. And we said, well, we're not fighting, we're debating over something. So this teacher, Mr. Cabral, he said, I want you to stop yelling, and I want you to listen to me, and just let me explain something to you. So he explained to us that typically the person that is yelling the loudest does not necessarily win the debate. He said, in fact, usually the person that is yelling the loudest knows the least. And then I thought about what he was saying. And I thought about the point I was trying to make, which wasn't much of a point at all. And I'm sure my friend was in the same headspace. Basically, we were just trying to out yell each other, trying to shush each other. And that was like an aha moment for me as far as this whole Supply the Y thing. And again, I didn't call it that back then. And from that point on, it kind of changed my view, the way I viewed problems, the way I viewed complex issues. And it all started with this sage advice that I got 30 years ago from this teacher.
Great. That's a great story.
Shout out to Mr. Cabral. Thank you, sir, for that.
Right, exactly. Right. See, those moments in high school can really shape a lot of things. I think that's really terrific. And so I know now, sort of in this moment that we're living in, where race has become a very prominent discussion that we need to be having with each other. You're using Supply the Y really as a platform to encourage people to have some of those difficult conversations about race that maybe folks weren't having previously.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So because I know you've done some, I don't know what we would call them, Facebook Live videos or recordings, Zoom recordings and stuff about that topic. And so talk a little bit more about that.
So I've done a couple different topics. So the biggest hot button topics right now are, of course, of race relations and police use of force, both of which are something that I know quite a bit about. because I am also part of my duties at the police station is I am also the defensive tactics coordinator for the Stoughton Police Department, and I teach defensive tactics for the state through the Municipal Police Training Council. So this is something that I'm passionate about. So I enjoy trying to educate people and trying to get people to express what it is they feel so passionately about. And then maybe trying to see if we can get some middle ground in there. Because, as you know, most of life is somewhere in the middle. It's all in the gray area. And if I can get people to see that it should be in the gray area and that not everything's 100%. You don't always, in police work, especially if we're talking use of force, it's always based on a set of circumstances at a given time with a given set of human beings. So those circumstances can change by simply switching out one of those human beings. You know what I mean? So me, Dean Jenkins, police officer, might handle something completely different than Stephanie Patton, police officer. For a number of reasons. We're different people. We have different thought processes, different abilities, different sizes. So that's part of what I do. Now, in regards to race relations, what I'm trying to get people to do is I'm trying to get people, especially if they're from Stoughton, which is a very diverse town. So chances are, if you grew up in Stoughton, you have friends of different races, which is one of the best things about this town, if you ask me.
Right.
But now what's going on is dividing people. So one of the things that I'm trying to do to Supply the Why is I'm trying to give people a foundation and some basic guidance as to remembering what it was about these people of different races that you loved at one point. What was it that drew you together in the first place? And why is it that you're willing to throw all that out the window over an issue that didn't take place in our town?
Right. Yep. And I think that what you're talking about too are some of those, and I've heard you share some of your own personal stories and experiences, and sort of reminding people about, we're all individuals, and you're right, and a lot of folks in this community have really strong relationships with lots of different people, people who don't look like themselves, people of all races, and I think, and I've heard you talk about empathy and really hearing from each other. So I know you had a really powerful story about what it was like to grow up in Stoughton as a young Black man and a police officer that had a big impact on you. Would you be willing to share that story? I think it's a great story.
Absolutely. So the nuts and bolts of this story were I was on the basketball team when I was in high school. This was my junior year of high school. So we played one of the faraway towns, King Philip or Franklin, one of those towns where it took a long way to get back to Stoughton. So by the time we got back, for whatever reason, the school was locked, and we weren't able to get into school. That was before cell phones. So my lime green pager that I had was not going to save me. So myself and this cheerleader that was also in my grade, young white girl, we were locked out, and it was an absolute downpour. It was one of those like late February 39-degree rains, like miserable. So we couldn't get in to call our folks. So we made a decision that it was either we stayed outside in the rain or we started walking. So I decided, I said, hey, listen, I'll walk you to your house, and then I'll walk to my house. So she lived about 1.5 miles away from the high school, and I lived at least 3 miles away from her. So I might not have gotten home until it was time to go to school the next day. It would have taken me so long to get home. As we're walking, we're probably about 1/2 mile away from the high school, and next you know, I see a bright white light shining from behind us in front of us. And I hear, "What are you two doing?" over a loudspeaker. So my eyes are popping out of my head, because keep in mind now, this is 1992. This is very close to when Rodney King occurred. So here I am, young Black man, walking with a white girl, and then I'm getting confronted what seems to me to be angrily by the police. So I'm absolutely terrified of what might happen at this point. So I turn around, and I have my varsity jacket on. It was over myself and this young lady, and I point to the name on my varsity jacket. And I say, I'm like, hey, it's me. I'm Dean Jenkins. And I'm pointing. I'm putting the helmet on my jacket. I'm like, I'm me, the football basketball player. It's just me. And he goes, I'm not talking about that. He's like, what are you doing out in this rain? He's like, get in the car. So So of course, like two good kids, we do what we told. We get in the car. I'm sitting up front. The young lady sitting in the back. We drop her off first, and after she gets out of the car, I think the officer could tell that I was afraid, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So he turns up the radio, and I don't know how old you are. I think I'm probably a little older than you, Stephanie. So he puts on 94.5, which used to be WZOU, the Zoo Cat. That was like the first like hip hop station. So I hear him put on this hip hop, and I start smiling, and I look over. I said, "You listen to hip hop too?" So he looks at me, and again, at the time, I mean, this guy's probably in his early 30s, but I mean, that's an old man to a 16-year-old. So to me, I'm thinking it's this old guy out of touch, and he looks at me and he goes and he laughs. He says, "Well, what kind of music am I supposed to listen to?" And that was the icebreaker for us. So by the time we got to my parents' house where I grew up, and we sat in the driveway for probably 40 to 45 minutes. This guy's asking me about my goals, what are my aspirations, where do I see myself, all these phenomenal questions, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up talking, and what I didn't realize is how cruel what we were doing to my parents was, because I noticed that the curtain kept pulling back, and I could see my mother's glasses peeking out from behind the curtain. And it occurred to me years later that my mother probably thought that he was there to do a death notification because she hadn't seen me.
Oh, right.
I was supposed to be home hours ago, and she didn't hear from me because I couldn't get to a payphone to call her. So I found out later, when I went in the house, my parents were like, "You all right? What's going on?" Like, and I said, "It's all right. It's all right, Mom. It's a great time. I spoke to this cop, and we bonded." And one of the things that we did talk about was that I had heard that there were racist police officers in Stoughton. So we asked him. He says, "Oh, really? What are their names?" So I mentioned two names. Wouldn't you know, one of the names I mentioned was the guy who picked me up and drove me home. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was beyond a coincidence. And again, that sparked a friendship that has lasted to today. So here we are. It's 28 years later. I'm still friendly with this officer. I won't say his name if he's out there. Thank you for what you did for me. Thank you for being human at a time where I needed somebody to be human. And thank you for being willing to sit down and talk to me about what was on my mind and kind of alleviate my fears. It resonated with me clearly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this is part of the reason why you became a police officer?
Maybe later on. I'm not going to lie to you, Stephanie. I like most jocks. Like, I was a 3-sport athlete. Most jocks, I wanted to play sports till I couldn't play sports anymore. Then I wanted to be a coach and a gym teacher so I could coach other kids on how to play sports. Like, that was my dream growing up. It didn't really work out that way. I played football. I ended up in college. I ended up doing okay, and then I ended with a kind of a funky injury, and I just kind of lost my way for a little while. And then quite frankly, I got into law enforcement because I needed a job with steady benefits. And something opened up, and I said, I think I could do that. I'll just go apply, and here I am 16 years later.
Yep.
But now that I'm here, yes, that is part of my mission, is to do to others what that officer did for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. So that's a great story, and I think it highlights some things about probably what sometimes young people are thinking in situations. What might have been going through the officer's head, what was going through your head as a young person. The assumptions that people sometimes make because of things that are happening in the news and because of fears related to race. And so let's talk a little bit about when folks are having these kinds of, people are I think a lot of people are trying to have conversations with race with other people or with their kids in different ways than they were before. What are some of the suggestions that you have for people about, like, you should be thinking about these things or do not do this? Like, these are the wrong ways to do it. And here are some strategies that might work better.
That's a fantastic line of question in there, Stephanie. So the very first thing I'm going to tell people is going to sound counterintuitive, but if you hear me on this, it'll make sense. So to my white friends and family and all of my teammates, everybody that I love out there, stop saying that you're colorblind. You got to eliminate that altogether. And
I've heard you say that. Yep. Yeah.
When I walk into a room, I am a very large man. I'm imposing. I got a deep voice. I realize I'm a dark-skinned black male. And I know, unless you can't see, that I know that you can see that I'm dark skinned black. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, stop acting like you refuse to see it because you're so fair that it doesn't matter to you. The better way to approach that is to be like, yes, I see that, Dean, that you're dark skinned, and none of that matters to me because I care about what's underneath your dark skin. I care about the content of your character. I care about how you treat your family and how much you love your kids and your wife. Talk to me about how I am when I coach, how passionate I am with the kids around town, and how I always make sure that they give me their best, because in life they need to learn how to give their best. Those are the things that are important, not the fact that whether or not you recognize that I'm a black man or not. So I would definitely eliminate the colorblind speech. And again, I'm not mad at you if you do that. I'm not mad at you out there, whoever's out there. I'm not mad at you. But you have to look. You got to go beyond that a little bit, and you got to say, "Hey, I see you, and I love you anyway." And I think that's part of the problem right now. Right now, everybody's just looking at the surface, and they're forgetting the fact that there's a person under that surface, and that's the most important thing: the content of someone's character.
Yep. Great. And I think for a long time, people thought that was supposed to be that was the right thing to do, would be to say, I'm colorblind, and maybe with good intention, right? But I think that's really important what you're saying.
So if I could respond to that, definitely it's well-intentioned. Like, I would never take offense to that, but at the same time, it's kind of it's extremely oversimplistic saying that you're colorblind, because I've had people say things like, well, I'm colorblind and it's not a problem to me. And then I turn around and say, well, you know what? Maybe not everybody shares your colorblindness, because it's certainly a problem for some other folks on both sides of the fence.
Right.
So, I would eliminate the colorblind thing. Another thing that I would do, if you mentioned talking to your kids, treat your kids like they are intellectual beings. I'm a parent. You're a parent. One of the things we do sometimes is we want to keep our children innocent, and we want to protect them. And a fault that I'm going to talk about myself, a fault that I have done in the past is maybe I try to shield my children from the truth, because in my eyes, in doing so, I'm keeping them innocent just a second, a minute, a year longer. When in all actuality, I'm stunting their intellectual growth. Kids are a lot more resilient and a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for, even young kids. So you're better off giving them the straight truth and then explaining, hey, listen, if we're talking about race, hey, listen, yes, there are people of different colors, but that's not how we judge people in this house, in this family. We judge people by how they treat you, how they treat others. How does that person talk to their own mother and father? Like, those are the things that I want you to judge people on, not the color of the skin. I want you to acknowledge that somebody is a different color, and acknowledge the beauty and differences that we all have. There's beauty in differences. In my house, I have an interracial house. My wife is white, I'm dark skinned black, and my kids are a couple different shades of brown in between. And all of us have some level of beauty throughout. And that's one of the great things about my house. So I want people to celebrate that and not be apologetic or not be, standoffish about differences in people.
Yep. What else? Why else do you think these conversations are so hard for people? They're making it feel like it's so easy. Like, it should be so easy, right?
They're hard because it's uncomfortable. Human beings at their surface, especially Americans, like, we're not used to being uncomfortable. We live in a very comfortable society. It's instant gratification. For example, it's 91 degrees out right now. What am I doing? I'm sitting in my air-conditioned truck because it's comfortable. I could be outside if I wanted to, and I'd be just fine. I'd sweat a little bit, but it's not comfortable. These conversations are the same thing. These conversations are the 95-degree day with 98% humidity. That's what these conversations are. We can have them, and we can survive them, but people are standoffish about it because it's uncomfortable, and people's feelings might get hurt. So the best way to have these conversations is try to just try to make it a conversation. Stop trying to win
Mm-hmm.
every time you have a conversation with somebody. You know, you get in these verbal jousting matches, and it's like you're trying to score points instead of trying to convey thought processes and ideas with each other. And again, that circles back to supply the why. That's part of what I'm trying to do with supply the why.
Yep. Now, you had said earlier, before we came officially on the air, we were talking about folks have been reaching out to you and with different questions or ideas or things that they, want to talk to you about. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the community as you've been out doing these conversations?
So a lot of things I've been getting have been bouncing back and forth between use of force and racial issues. So since we're on the subject of race, I've been actually having a lot of white folks have been reaching out to me about how they've had friends of color that are now distancing themselves from them, and they don't know how to approach it, and they're hurt by it. And I can tell them that their feelings are valid, because like I spoke about a little while ago, I have, just like I'm sure you do, I have friends, people that I've grown up with, people whose houses I've eaten at, people whose houses I've slept over, that our relationships were built on as solid a ground as you ever could have. And it would hurt me deeply if they started walking sideways from me because of the color of my skin. So I certainly see how it would be that way on the other side of the fence, from a white person. So
right.
my advice to those people is have conversations one-on-one. Let's break it down to the lowest common denominator. One of the most difficult things to do in an emotionally charged event is to try to have a conversation in a large group, particularly a large group in which you are outnumbered from a thought process standpoint. Because what happens is, because again, human beings are imperfect animals. We develop a gang mentality, and we naturally flock to people that share our ideologies. So that's why I say, if you can eliminate all the noise that comes from having additional people and just have one-on-one conversations, that is a great way to start. And then you don't even address the race thing at all. Talk about what brought you together in the first place. What are your bonds? What are your things? What did you have in common? How did you get together in the first place? And start from there.
Great. That's really good advice. Are there other things you're hearing from folks too, or?
Yes. Yes, I'm also hearing a lot of blanket statements. So another big avoid, Stephanie, would be generalizations.
Yep.
So I'm hearing things like, everybody most people that belong to this group are like this, or act like that, or it's hard to talk to people from this group. So that to me is the lazy person's out. Because if you are just going to have one or maybe two bad experiences and now you're judging an entire group of people, you don't really want to be part of the solution. Like, you got to have more intestinal fortitude to stick it out. And the way I can feel very strongly about that, because when I grew up in Stoughton, it was not like the Stoughton you and I that we represent now. Stoughton, when I was a kid, was probably in the very high 90s of white and a very low percentage of black people in Stoughton.
Right. Yeah.
So I heard things, and people said horrible things to me when I was a kid. I would put the amount of horrible things that I heard up against just about any white person in this town that they've heard from black folks. And look at me. I was able to, even as a young person, I was able to realize that was not everybody that was white that felt that way about me. Not everybody was going to say nasty things to me, vile racial comments to me. It hurt my feelings.
Right.
It made me feel like a man without a country at times. But then I think about all the good white people, white kids, neighbors, friends, coaches I had that were there for me and did uplift me and did make sure I felt included and I felt like I had worth. And that's what you focus on. I can't get caught up on the handful of people that were going to have a problem with me no matter what kind of person I was. I can't do anything to help those people. But I can focus on the people that did look at the content of my character and did see something in me and try to foster that and try to make me part of the village that is Stoughton.
Right. So that's actually a really great segue. And I'm looking at the clock going, oh my God, we already only have 2 minutes left. I don't even know how that happens. So what comes next for you with this? When we talk about the village that is Stoughton and sort of growing some of the, the positive that already is here. How do people get in touch with you in terms of Supply the Why? How do they, sort of follow what you're doing and use what they can learn from you to be able to have these conversations in their circles and with their friends, family? How do people find out about that stuff? What would you suggest?
So, first of all, we're on Facebook. So I have a page, Supply the Why. So you can like my page on Facebook and you can see some of the things that I'm posting. I try to do at least one episode or project a week, and I release it, which is kind of like, I come up with a topic of the week based on interest, based on something that I'm feeling personally, and I share that on Facebook. So please like and share those when you see them. I also have a YouTube page where I share, it's Supply the Why YouTube page. If you subscribe to that, you'll get up-to-date access on everything that we're doing. So that's another way to keep in touch with what we're doing. And if there's something that's really bothering you, if you're stuck in some sort of place and you really can't find a way to get around it, reach out to me. You can send me an email at supplythewhy@gmail.com and just kind of lay it out for me. And if there's any way that I can provide some guidance or some moral support, or even if you're looking for me to tell you, hey, am I on solid ground here or not, I'll give it to you straight, because I think that's what we need more of. We need people that'll give it to you straight. I don't have a dog in this fight, as in that, like, there's no political agenda. Like, I just want people to get together, and I want to help guide people with their problem solving process, help shape some new paradigms, and just really make people feel better and get back to where we were maybe a few years ago.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, we are at time, and I can't believe how fast that went. I feel like we could keep talking easily for another hour. So, and I appreciate.
You're very
I know
easy
that
to talk
you're
to,
doing.
Stephanie.
Oh, thank you. And you got to go back to your dad thing, which is, really important. I know you crammed us in between some important dad duties. So we want to let you get back to that. But please, I want to say to our folks at home, please reach out to Dean through the ways that he mentioned. Supply the Why on Facebook. You can email him, supplythewhy@gmail.com. And yeah, I was going to say, show us your shirt. This whole episode, we couldn't see it, which is awesome.
I'm such a big guy. I got a pan across my chest. I got to do more salads, I guess.
Well, I really appreciate this. Has been a great discussion, and thanks again, Dean, and thank you all for watching. Have a great evening.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie. Good night.